There's a Wall Street Journal op-ed released today by a writer named Thane Rosenbaum, and he argues that Gaza civilians aren't civilians. Okay, I'm not sure this guy understands the concept of a tautology. Something that is true by definition. It's like saying X is equal to X. That's correct. X is the same thing. But he's saying, no, Gaza civilians and Palestinian civilians, they're not really civilians. You can't look at them as civilians. Oh, okay. He would like us to believe something that is, by definition, illogical. It's stunning. I mean, we've really gotten to a point that the hawks in Israel and America have just gone 100% Looney Tunes. They're just off the deep end. They make absolutely no sense. At face value, you can reject some of their arguments. So he says that Palestinian civilians have, quote, forfeited their right to be called civilians. Okay. This guy is so fucking crazy. Benjamin Netanyahu is to the left of him. Even he says in American media, he was saying, we do feel bad for the civilians that are being killed in Gaza. And by the way, I don't agree with Benjamin Netanyahu. He really is a vicious neoconservative who cracks down and loves war. But at least he's admitting, the Gaza civilians are civilians. You can't argue against that. Well, Thane Rosenbaum did. He says, quote, under such maddening circumstances, are the adults, in a legal and moral sense, actually civilians? To qualify as a civilian, one has to do more than simply look the part. On some basic level, you forfeit your right to be called civilians when you freely elect members of a terrorist organization as a statesman, invite them to dinner with blood on their hands, and allow them to set up shop in your living room as their base of operations. At that point, you begin to look a lot more like conscripted soldiers than innocent civilians, and you have wittingly made yourself targets. Yes. Brilliant point. If you support or supported Hamas, or if you support or supported anybody who may have done unjust violence, well, then you're not a civilian anymore. So, you get whatever you deserve. We're not going to feel bad for you. You're not really a civilian. Again, that's a great point. So I take it Thane Rosenbaum also wrote an article, and he feels the same way about people who support the Likud party, which is one of the right-wing parties in Israel, Netanyahu's party, because they're still doing a bombing campaign with over 600 people now killed. As of last week, the UN said 77% of them are civilians. So if you voted for the Likud party in Israel, there's blood on your hands and you're just not really a civilian, right? You're supporting people who did unjust violence, so I guess you're not really a civilian. Or here's another idea. How about Republicans in the United States of America who voted for George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, and then, of course, Bush went on to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. By the way, Iraq did not attack us on 9/11. Saddam didn't even have weapons of mass destruction, so he invaded a country that had nothing to do with us, and at least 200,000 civilians died in the war that we started as a result of our invasion. So I guess the Republicans here who voted for George W. Bush, they're not civilians either. Look, I'm just going by the standard that he set up. He's saying that if you support or supported a group that does unjust violence, well, then you're no better than them. You're not really a civilian. Do you understand how mental this guy is? Do you understand how little reasoning and rationality and thinking shit through went into this column? Look, point blank period, you are simply dehumanizing people. You're saying, the enemy is the enemy. Even if you're somebody who didn't do any violence against Israel, well, you might like some people who maybe did some violence against Israel that was unjust. So you're the friend of somebody who's a really fucking bad person, so you're no longer a civilian. Should we also kill Charles Manson's hairdresser? Should we go after Ted Bundy's car mechanic. And look, he was friends with somebody, he knew somebody, and he had lunch with the guy once. He supported a guy who ended up doing horrible things. I guess that they're not a bad person. I mean, come on, man, come on. It's amazing that we're reading articles and listening to comments of people that are almost brazenly in favor of genocide. You know, and look, in this case, you could say, oh, well, you're extrapolating a little bit. Yes and no, maybe. He's saying civilians aren't civilians, so what? Maybe it's justified to do violence against them. You're bordering, calling for genocide, okay? But we don't even need to decode and do this and do that because, what's her name? Ayelet Shaked, the Israeli politician, female Israeli politician, a few weeks back, we covered the story where she posted a Facebook message saying, yeah, no, all Palestinians are the enemy. All Palestinians are the enemy. So it's anything is justified against them. She was calling for genocide against the Palestinians. Look, I said it once, I'll say it again, man. I'm against all violence. I don't want Hamas to shoot rockets into Israel. That is insanely stupid and violent, and you shouldn't do it, right? But by the same token, Israel needs to stop bombing, and they need to stop invading, and they need to stop killing people. They're getting so many more civilians. You know, even the idea of destroying the tunnels, which they want to do, because they say the tunnels brings weapons into Gaza. Well, yes, it does, but it also brings much-needed, infrastructure support and food and water and relief. So, I mean, we're having an insane conversation now where people are actually calling to not treat civilians like they're civilians. Could you imagine if this was a Palestinian writing this? Just somebody writing this, doing an op-ed in some newspaper saying, well, you know, if you really think about it, the people that are in Israel right now, close to Gaza, well, they're occupying Palestinian territory. So, I mean, are they really innocent? Are they really not civilians? They're in territory. They're occupying somebody else's territory. So whether or not they actually personally did violence, they're supporting people who did violence because they're in occupied territory. So I don't know if they're really civilians. Maybe there are no innocent Israeli civilians. Immediately, everybody would say, you're a terrorist and you're calling for genocide and you're a fucking idiot. But we don't do that immediately when it's somebody saying it on the Israeli side. We should maybe try this thing called objectivity out. It really helps you solve problems.